Hello. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicola Belmonte, and today I'm going to be talking about from data journalism to data illustration. So basically, the work we do at Twitter visualizing data. So I work at Twitter on the Visual Insights team. It's a small team that does data visualizations. And I lead the interactive.twitter.com project. It's a web page that has public-facing data visualizations. It's the a cross team effort between like the communications team, the marketing teams, and the analytics team, which is the team I am on. And yeah, the main idea behind the data visualizations we do, which is public-facing stuff, is try to kind of leverage the cool things about the platform, right? So the platform has, I'd say, like 3 kind of main features. We're global. We've been called the pulse of the planet many times. You've probably seen data visualizations of like when people, wake up and go to sleep and how that correlates with the number of tweets they make and stuff like that. So we are really the pulse of the planet. Also the fact that we're real-time. And that's like a pretty big challenge for data visualization, having like a real-time platform. And finally, conversational, right? So you have, within the text of a tweet, you have at mentions and you have hashtags, which are kind of like channels, but you also can explore other stuff within the text, like named entity recognition, topic analysis, sentiment analysis, a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of things that you can take out of those 140 characters. So what we try to do is focus on different verticals. And the verticals we have depend on kind of like the audience we have. So we can redefine those verticals as well. But when we plan on doing data visualizations, we have government, news, sports, TV, and music. And kind of those verticals determine how you're going to be thinking about doing the visualization. And the main idea is like, what is the tone of the visualization I'm going to be working on? Do I have to tell a story? Do I have to present a lot of data, like 1 million data elements to you and for you to explore and try to get your own findings? Do I need to expose a point? It's like expositive data visualization. Or do I have to just be fun and make you play with the data and like maybe doesn't really have to be that insightful, right? So yeah, so I'm going to try to show a bunch of data visualizations or work we did around these verticals and kind of like show you how we work and maybe inspire you to, when you're creating your own data visualizations to use some of these kind of approaches. Of course, we use web standards for all this, right? So the stuff I like the most is government data viz, but it's also, I know, like the less fun and a bit more boring. But we worked on this one for the State of the Union address. This is it's done once yearly. It's like the President of the United States gives a speech. And so what we try to do is like government people or the people within the government really read like long documents and stuff like that. And so what we try to do is like to present that very same document but enhanced with the data visualization, right? So let's try this. Yep, it's loading. So what we did here is at the top you have a summary of the speech, basically. It's a stream graph, and we did topic analysis on tweets that happened during the address of the president. So these are tweets that talk about energy, jobs, fairness, healthcare, defense, etc. The other cool thing is that this is not only a summary of what happened during the address, it's also an index. So if I like enter the page and like I don't really care much about reading like 40 pages of like a transcript for a speech, maybe what I can just do is, well, I care about what the president said about healthcare, and so I can just go click there, and so this takes me exactly to the time to what the president was saying when these tweets occurred. So on the right, what we have is kind of like something that leverages a bit more the real-time aspect of the platform. And is, when you scroll down, it will tell you what is the most discussed topic on Twitter and also the distribution of those tweets. So like you can say, people in like this specific state care a lot about healthcare, but if you go over to, I don't know, defense, it'll tell you that, some other states care more about defense. And so the main idea within the government type of data visualizations is always try to enhance whatever document we have. And so how we did this is a very iterative process with a lot of feedback and looping as much as you can. The first iteration was this. We didn't know we were going to have the transcript before the speech because we annotated every paragraph with the timestamp of like, when did he start saying this till the end of that paragraph, and then grabbed tweets and did that topic analysis for that specific paragraph. So in order to do that, you need to have the transcript before the president actually says anything, before the actual speech. And that's props to the media team for having that. So what we did is the first approach just have like, every row is a minute. Every column is a different state in the United States. And then we'll just have like volume of tweets. And this was horrible. Like I showed this to a team. I was like, I mean, there's nothing interesting from this. No interesting insight, anything. Instead of having the transcript, we were just planning on just putting some quotes on the right that the president mentioned during that minute. And then at the bottom, instead of having like a topic analysis, we were just using word frequency count. So for example, we just like count the frequency of the words in the tweets for that minute. So in this case is, it's the third minute within the speech, and the words you can see are like Obama, President, State, Union, watching, watch, which basically means I just got here, I'm watching the State of the Union address. So this was the second iteration. We already knew we were going to have the transcript for the speech itself before it happened. But we didn't have it by that time because it was like three weeks earlier. So what we did is we took the 2013 State of the Union address transcript, and then we took 2013 tweets and all that stuff, and we started doing that data mining with that. We built a data visualization with this, and feedback was very positive. Like people were like, scrolling down and seeing like what was happening with the topic analysis, and like they were actually getting pretty interesting insights from the viz. The third one was like, people were mostly saying like, hey, would like to, have some sort of summary of the speech at the top. And what can we do? And, stream graphs are very kind of mainstreamy right now. So it's like, well, I want to try something different. But people didn't like it. So in the end, we ended up building a stream graph. So this took about 4 to 5 iterations within 3 weeks. I'd say that, I would recommend having a process that even iterates more. This, after that, was turned into a paper that I presented at IEEE Viz in Paris last week. And yeah, for other examples of interesting things we did with Gov data is, this one is about the elections, the midterm elections, so like government and senator elections and stuff like that. So what we did is we took all of the candidates that are on Twitter, and we took all the mutual follows for the candidates. So if A follows B and B follows A, we will draw a line with that. Then we will color them by Democrat or Republican, and then run this force-directed algorithm. So these clusters emerge from the visualization algorithm. It's not like we decided to put these blue nodes on the left and red nodes on the right. It's just like the algorithm, it's a physical simulation, right? And so it ends up showing a cluster on the left and cluster on the right, which means that Republicans like to follow Republicans, Democrats like to follow Democrats, and there's not much communication between them. And then you can go ahead and click on one of the candidates and see the exact list of all the candidates that he follows and is followed back, and all the Democrat and so on. But always trying to maintain kind of a good for print aspect on the web page. So this is something that you can scroll down, and we have the kind of the main points that or main insights from the data viz. So very document oriented. And this is the third one that I'm not going to be showing, but it's on interactive.twitter.com. It's a narrative data viz that we did for the Brazil elections. So the other vertical is news. So news is kind of interesting because you need to act fast. It's not like you have 3 weeks to do something, because otherwise it won't be news anymore, right? And the other thing is that you need to be mindful. So if you take some kind of disaster that happens somewhere, you need to be very conscious of what you're showing and what you're not showing. In this case, this viz that we built was right after the Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines, and it was, I was looking at my Twitter feed, and everybody was saying like, hey, please help the Philippines, etc. And like, almost all the tweets I had on my timeline were about that. So it was like, well, this is a huge thing. So let's try to visualize how big it is. And so what we did is, I had kind of this idea of having this map that is centered on the Philippines, which is the main focus of attention, right? And then try to get all the different locations where the geolocated tweets were happening. Geolocated tweets that were mentioning Philippines and help in about like 22 different languages. And then, yeah, I drew a line from each one of those locations to the Philippines because they're talking about that. And then I ran this algorithm which clusters the edges. So this groups edges by, it's not grouped by hand, but it's like this algorithm again creates clusters of edges within that graph. And these regions organically emerge from that algorithm. So now you can see, and you can use this as a navigation system and say, like, I want to focus on the US and see all the more interesting or engaging or informative tweets about Typhoon Haiyan in North America, and same happen in Europe and so on. So for this, we start with like an equally rectangular projection of a map, and then we do a small thing which is just center it on the Philippines, which is a small thing, but I think that it's like an important thing because it puts that in the middle. Then we just draw a straight line from each one of those locations to the center of the Philippines, and then we run this algorithm which is called multi-level agglomerative edge bundling for large graphs, Mingle. And then we color-coded each one of those clusters with a categorical color palette, so we can easily identify all the clusters. So up to here, that algorithm is really awesome. It works really fast, and it has a very clever algorithm. The only thing is that when you bundle all these edges together into one group, the resulting edge is also 1 pixel width, which is not, you know, the thing you'd like, because it means that it doesn't really take into account the weight of each bundle. So we extended this algorithm so that it would take into account bundle weight, and it would take into account like directed edges. And we open sourced this. We have a great open source team that always want us to open source as much as possible. So that was actually pretty easy to do. So we have kind of like a kitchen sink for that here. This is the example. You can choose the number of neighbors to clusters. So this means that, you know, if you put more neighbors, there will be less clusters with more edges, basically. And what you can interpolate here is between the initial state of straight lines to the bundle edges. You can play a bit with the margin, which is the stuff we added to have this kind of like bundle weight being taken care of. You can color by cluster, as I showed before, or you can color by direction. So in this case, edges that start from a blue point to a red point are like the direction. The direction is encoded in that. So here, it's not very easy to see how many edges are going from one place to the other and vice versa. So what we did also is we extended the algorithm to sort a bit the edges when you're creating the bundles, to group the edges going from one direction to the other. And so now it's a bit easier to see that about half of the edges are going from one place to the other and so on. Yeah. So on sports, the audience for sports is like pretty geeky, right? It's like they always like to know the exact stats and goals and like yellow cards and so on. So we had a lot of fun during the World Cup with this. This interactive visualization that was built by one of the people in our team, Chris, is pretty amazing because it's an exploratory visualization. I'll give you all the matches during the World Cup with all the tweets per minute during each match, and I will show you how those correlate with each one of the goals. So here you can see during a match how those correlate with specific goals. And you can scroll down and see all the matches. You can see how many tweets happened during each match. You can see how many goals we had. You can see how many yellow cards, red cards, and so on. And also what you can do is just like select a team and follow the path of that team during the entire tournament. Another interesting data that we did with this was, and that really shows the kind of like global aspect of the platform, is this one. So what we did is basically, we had these hash flags during the World Cup. The 3-letter country code that you could use with the hashtag, and this would give you the flag of the country, right? So if you put like hashtag ARJRG, you'd see the Argentina flag. So we use the hash flags. We know that, for example, Argentina will use a lot of the Argentina hash flag, right? But what is the second country most mentioned by people in Argentina? Or what is the second country most mentioned by France or by the US and so on? And so we started analyzing that to see interesting relationships with these countries. So for example, if you go to Argentina, you might see that countries that mention Argentina the most are Nigeria, and you can see the list on the left, basically. And on the right are the countries being mentioned by Argentina. So Argentina has been mentioning Brazil, Colombia is the second most, and so on. So what's interesting is that we started seeing a lot of interesting immigration patterns. So for example, if you click on the USA, well, Iran talks a lot about the USA, but the other thing is that on the right, the USA, the country most mentioned by the USA is Mexico. And this kind of tells you that there's not only one voice in the US, just like rooting for the US, but there are like multiple communities. And the biggest one after the one that roots for the USA is the one that roots for Mexico and so on. Same happens with France, for example. You see a lot of like French-speaking countries like Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, and Switzerland, and Nigeria, maybe, that talk about France. And then France, the first one, most mentioned country is Algeria, and kind of like also tells you a lot about immigration within France. And also you can see proximity. So for example, Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina are like really close to each other, right? And so you have the country most mentioning Bosnia and Herzegovina is Croatia, and then Croatia is the country most mentioned by Bosnia and Herzegovina. All right, so I've been showing SVG, 2D canvas kind of stuff. One is interesting to use WebGL. So maybe when you have a lot of elements to render, that's for exploratory data visualization, but also when you have a story to tell, or when you want to use like kind of like the cool factor. So for example, we did this visualization for Cannes Lions. So this was part of a deck, and the visualization was exploring mentions of Ian McKellen and Sir Patrick Stewart, and mentions of both users through time. And so the main idea was kind of like to show the correlations of like, how the relationship between these two actors came to be. And so we correlated this with a trip they made to New York City, in which like they were working on a play together, and then also towards the end they were also talking or mentioning. There were mentions of both a lot too, because they were kind of like promoting the latest like X-Men video, and so you can see kind of correlations of those things. So this is more like for impact or kind of like eye candy, or I call it data illustration as opposed to data visualization or data journalism. The other thing is maybe if you want to make interactive experiences, and we built this for CES and South by Southwest. And so this is built from scratch. We already knew which machine we were targeting, and so we started working with WebGL and like implementing from scratch all the touch event and multi-touch stuff. And so we built this globe in which you can kind of filter tweets, for example, by a keyword, South by Southwest tweet, and you can swipe through the different tweets, and that will correlate with the tweets on the globe. So there are like 2 linked visualizations there. If you zoom in or you do that type of stuff. We worked also on having this expanded to be a plane from a globe, and then you could zoom in with both fingers and kind of pan around. And so this was like a very fun interactive experience. Not very kind of insightful, but super fun, and people were like kind of hooked and using there. By the way, there's a book called WebGL Insights. I'm writing a chapter on that. Definitely recommend you to check that out. And yeah, we talk about things like this. Temperature anomalies data visualization, which this one is using NASA imagery to kind of show the differences in temperature in the world. So if you see around, like for example, 1900s, it's pretty mild but if you go to 90s or even like 2000s, you can see that there's like a huge change in temperature anomalies. So this means that the temperature is growing more than 3 degrees. I won't show this. So key takeaways. So if there's one thing you need to kind of remember after this talk is the audience. The audience determines the verticals you're focusing on. It determines the tone of your data visualization. And it ends up determining also the standards you're using. Because, for example, at Twitter, we have more than half of the people just like logging with their mobile phones. So what phones are they using? What are the best standards to use for those phones, et cetera? And yeah, I just recommend you to check that out, interactive.twitter.com. That's my Twitter handle. Thanks.